Cool. Welcome to another edition of Buc What You Heard. My name is Gene. You can reach me at Super Heavyweight on Twitter. You follow me, I'll follow you back. And here we are. It's the off season for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There is still football going on, but I don't care about any of those other teams. So there's that. But I'm joined tonight by my co-host, Michael Pless. How are you doing tonight, Michael?
Doing good, Gene. Yeah, it sucks that we're not in the playoffs once again. So to watch playoff football this past weekend, that hurt. So it was tough. But the off season is starting up, and try to find ways how to improve this football team, and that's the only way. That's what we have to do going forward. We want to be a playoff contender and start competing for division titles. So I got a lot of work to do, though. A lot of work ahead.
Absolutely. That's our coping mechanism, trying to figure out what we need to do. So, this week we're going to talk about Tampa's offense, and we're looking at the season, our just past season, which was totally weird. This is a weird season from the hurricane all the way through to the end of the season. Just so many twists and turns, injuries, and things that just you didn't see coming from last year. And unfortunately, the team didn't live up to the expectations that we saw, where we thought we would see from 2016 going into 2017. And what I want to do tonight, I kind of want to start with what happened. Why are we here? Why is Tampa a 5-win team when you've got a lot of players that on this team? It really should they should have won more than 5 games. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah, absolutely. I thought, if we're just speaking offense, they definitely had the talent to be a playoff contender. You have into year three of the offense. You have playmakers on the outside with Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson. We thought was going to be good. We thought it was going to be decent enough to act. For whatever reason, it just didn't all come together. It started in training camp. They had a very soft training camp, according to a lot of reports. Not a lot of hitting, not a lot of live tackling. And then in the preseason, again, the same issues. They move the ball very well between the 20s, but once they get inside the red zone, continue to stall for whatever reason, and had to settle for way too many field goals this year. And that was really the main issue for the offense this year. And we thought the running game was going to return to that 2015 form, and it didn't happen. Doug Martin is just not the same guy that he used to be. Same could be said for, the other running backs. Charles Sims has been disappointing. It really wasn't consistency as far as the run game goes, and far as how it was being called. It just didn't work out for whatever reason.
Yeah, I'm totally with you on that. I mean, when you think about it, Peyton Barber was your leading rusher for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, not Doug Martin. Right. Doug Martin came in second, and then Jacquizz Rodgers was right behind him. What frustrates me more than anything, I thought that drafting Charles Sims was a good move at the time. The guy can catch the ball out of the backfield, and I thought that you would be able to utilize that and make it work, but he hasn't developed like I would imagine that he would have developed, with his skill set, unfortunately. And what's crazy about it is Jameis Winston ended up with 135 rushing yards and a touchdown, and Charles Sims didn't even break 100 yards for the season. So there again, that's a huge disappointment, because you need that running game to assist the passing game for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So, I kind of wanted to touch on that. And, I mentioned some of these players. I'm going to start with Peyton Barber, because, he was a leading rusher. Do you see him coming back to Tampa next season? And if so, do you I know that we don't know. I mean, at this point right now, I know we haven't hit the draft and we haven't hit free agency, but just as we stand right now, do you see him playing a part in this team next season?
I think he'll be back. I mean, he's an exclusive rights free agent, so I mean, he's going to be signed back to a pretty relatively friendly team contract. expect him to return and compete for a spot on this team. And I'm not going to say he's going to be the featured back, but he'll definitely have a role on this team, whether it be special teams or being a ball carrier for sure. So the backfield is going to be revamped. It's going to be overhauled. I don't expect Doug Martin or Charles Sims to return. Personally, I don't expect them to be back. Same could be said for Jacquizz Rodgers. So pretty much you're going to be looking for 3 new backs, I think, if they want to carry 4. To be honest, these running backs that they have now, they just don't really complement each other very well. It's too predictable as far as when certain guys are on the field. You know, when Charles Sims is on the field, it's going to be a pass. Rarely do you see him run the football. Same thing could be said for Jacquizz Rodgers. Doug Martin, again, he's predictable as well, you know. And they don't really throw the ball to Doug Martin, and you expect him to usually drop it. I mean, he doesn't have the best of hands. So going to get some more dynamic running backs that can be all 3 down backs, you know, sort of similar to how the Saints are. I mean, they have interchangeable backs that can play any down. A lot of these offenses, I mean, you look at the Eagles, you look at Falcons, they have guys that can come in and you don't know whether it's going to be a run or pass. So that's something I think to look for this offseason for sure.
Yeah. So are there any running backs that you have your eye on, you know, for between now and combines and in the draft? Is there anybody out there that you see besides Sony Michel?
Yeah. I mean, Sony Michel, definitely. That guy is a workhorse for Georgia. Definitely should be on the radar for the Bucs. But I mean, this draft is loaded for running backs. I mean, there's a lot of running backs. It goes as far as 12 deep, as far as into day 3 of the draft. So you could easily get, you know, a starting running back on 5, which is good. Loaded again. There's a lot of running backs that I like. Sony Michel being one of them. I think his stock has drastically improved. He's got this vision, can catch the ball in the backfield. He might be a first-round pick now, so depends on, you know, where people fall. Rashad Penny is another guy, state that's really good. I like John Kelly out of Tennessee as well. He's a guy that could be, you know, had late in the draft, probably, you know, day 3 at least. I just like how he plays. I think he's a little Kamara Jr., to be honest. Same thing goes for, like, you know, those are a couple guys that I like.
Okay. All right. Yeah. And, you know, again, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the general manager's on the clock. The head coach is on the clock. The defensive coordinator's on the clock. This has to be a perfect off season, period. End of story. Because everybody, you're going to have to throw the whole team away if they can't get this right. So, you know, free agency is definitely going to be something that Tampa's going to be looking at. I think Tampa's number 5 in the salary cap for the NFL, the 5 highest salary cap in the NFL, correct?
Yeah, they have space. Again, now some of that space is going to be used for their own guys to re-sign. You know, you still have contracts coming up. You have Mike Evans, Jameis Winston, Quan Alexander, Ali Marpet. So a lot of guys that are your key core players that are going to need new contracts. Pretty for free agency. Again, you know, looking at free agency as far as the offensive side, it's pretty much, I think, running back and offensive line is, I think, where they're going to target if they want to go into the free agent pool. It's available, long way to go, but I think offensive guard and running back would be ideal spots to attack in free agency, especially if you want to build that depth and get some veterans, and then also, you know, draft those positions as well to really. I think that's what good teams do. I think that's something the Bucs will look into this offseason.
Yeah. Now, I want to ask you, just kind of going back, you know, over the last couple of seasons, how would you grade the Tampa Bay Buccaneers as far as the running game over the past under Jason Light? How would you rate them? I mean, because you've had a chance to look at the progression from the time he's gotten here up into where we are now. And I know 2015, we saw a big leap there. But other than that, I mean, what are your thoughts on the running game? And do you feel like more needs to be done to more attention is needed for that position?
Well, I mean, it looks like, looking back at it, 2015, the offensive line put together by, you had two rookies on the offensive line and Donovan Smith and Ali Marpet alongside Joe Hawley, and then also you had DeMar Dotson as your right tackle. Now, those guys actually did a really good job. And again, Doug Martin made a lot of those guys look better than they were. Fantastic year. So, I mean, the running game there, you saw what kind of production it could have. But again, the same problems still remained as far as the red zone offense, scoring points. So it did help as far as the offense overall, as far as moving the ball. But again, there were still issues. And I think that goes back to just not having in the interior front that we need as far as being physical. Now, I will say Logan Mankins, he made a big difference because you can see it as far as the offensive line has digressed, over the last 2 years since he's been gone. Veteran presence, and I think his ability to also run block and move on the run. Holly, who I think is a better run blocker than people give him credit for just because of his ability to get downfield. So Ali Marpet as a guard, he was asked to pull a lot on these run plays, and now you have a J.R. Sweezy who was asked to do that this past season. Now Marpet was really good at center. Don't get me wrong, he's really good, and I think that's where he belongs because he's the most athletic lineman that we have and a dominant center when it's all said and done, I believe. This hasn't been good enough. The running game hasn't been consistent enough, whether it be play calling, play design, whether it be just nothing has really found that consistency where it's, there every week, eye on, week in and week out, and you help Jameis Winston. And it's put a lot more pressure on Jameis, and it's unfair to give him credit. I mean, he's shined above it, and he's really played, hasn't been a running game to lean on.
Yeah. I see what you're saying. And again, that's where Jameis Winston was at his best when he had when he had a running game, because it opened up everything else, and we just haven't seen that consistency. So again, this is something that Jason Light, they have to get this right. I don't care if it's free agency or if it's possibly in the draft. But they have to get those running backs, because it is possible. You look at the Saints and who they were able to get. You look at the Atlanta Falcons were able to get a dynamic back who's been consistently playing well. So, it's something that, Tampa has, they have to fix that. And, again, there is a lot of opportunities here. And like you mentioned, the draft this year is very heavy with running backs. So there will be somewhere between 1 and 7, and I think there are 2 6th-round picks, if I'm not mistaken, something like that for this draft. But there will be opportunities to get somebody.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
absolutely.
So just kind of some of the other things I was wanting to touch on, as we're talking about the offense and what happened. I want to talk more about the line. And I know that the offensive line has gotten knocked a lot. I mean, everybody's talking about the line's trash, the line's this. The line was inconsistent. It was inconsistent, in my opinion. Basically, what you saw was there were times where Jameis Winston had all day to look down the field and throw the ball. Then there were other times where he was running for his life. They just couldn't. They just couldn't maintain that throughout the whole game. So that's definitely something, that, Tampa needs to be looking at. I know for me, the one thing that I saw was the guard play needs to be a lot better. You can't have your quarterback getting sacked 33 times. I mean, that's unacceptable. it's something that needs to get fixed.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, looking at the offensive line, you know, like we said, it's just I like, but again, the pieces are just not all the pieces are there right now. I think looking at the guards, I don't expect J.R. Sweezy to return. I think he's going to be a cap casualty. The guy's healthy, and I don't think he's going to be able to return or expecting to have, you know, like he was in Seattle. And now, given the fact in Seattle, he wasn't that great of a pass blocker to begin with, and that's something where he struggles at. Not that dominant run blocker that he was with the Seahawks. And I think the back is still, you know, troubling him. He's just not able to turn his body as far range of motion. And you can see it on tape. He just looks stiff out there. And then, you know, with Kevin Panfield, I think, honestly, I think he's a better tackle than he is guard. I just don't think he's physical enough to your guys, and he gets blown off the ball quite consistently. Ideal at right tackle. Now, if they want to bring him back and, you know, sign him to, you know, a friendly contract and have him compete with DeMar Dotson, you know, right tackle, I think he could do that very well. I think he could be the future right tackle for sure. Goes with Caleb Bendenach. I don't think he's a right tackle. I think he's better at the inside where he plays guard or, you know, play left guard. I think he would be to take over the right guard spot if they decide to do that, or at least bring a guy in to compete with him. I mean, definitely in free agency and the draft, I think they definitely need to focus on guards this offseason, whether it be a guy like Andrew Noel from Carolina or Josh Klein, Fulton, any of those guys that might be available, good additions. And then in the draft, I mean, if you're sitting at 7 and from Notre Dame, he would be an ideal pick. I mean, that guy's a stud. So
yeah, but you know, I'm kind of wondering, will he be gone? You know, number 7. I mean, you look at the Indianapolis Colts. Are they bringing Andrew Luck back? And you know, you need to protect that guy from you know, injury, or I don't know where they are, but you know, those are different things that I kind of look at where other teams' needs are, and you know, that's somebody that could easily get snatched up because guards are like gold in the NFL. And to be very honest, this draft, I didn't really see a whole lot of guards that really stood out to me. I don't know about you. I don't know what.
Right. Yeah, there's only really 2 guards that deserve to go in the top 50, and that's Quentin Nelson and Billy Price from Ohio State. 2 I would take probably in the first 2 days of the draft. There's some guys that could be very good, valuable day 3 that you could develop and be something down the road. But as far as instant impact players, guys, Nelson and Price, I agree with you. I think he should be a top 5 pick. If he's available at 7 and the Bucs don't have a pass rushing option, surprised if he's not the pick, because one starter and him next to Ali Marpet would be a combo going forward.
Yeah, most definitely. You know, I can't wait next week when we will be talking about the defense totally next week. That's what we'll be focused on. So if you guys have any questions about defense for next week, hit me up and make sure I get your questions, and I'll be sure to get those answered for you. You know, and again, you know, I know we've talked about the offensive line and we talked running back. Let's talk quarterback a little bit. You know, Jameis Winston, even though he had the shoulder injury, he had a really good season. In my opinion, you know, just based on what they had and non-existent running game, and always, you know, the other team had the lead and they're always playing from behind. I thought he made a lot of improvements. He made a lot of statistical improvements over the year before. So, you know, I'm really looking forward to what he's going to be able to do next year. And somebody asked about what's wrong with Jameis Winston. And Jameis Winston, in my opinion, is a blessing and a curse. I know this is going to sound weird, but Jameis Winston will make that play that you're like, oh my goodness, that was an amazing play. The walk-off touchdown against the Saints is a great example of what I'm talking about, a blessing. But then there are other times where he throws into triple coverage or he's falling down and he just launches the ball. That's Jameis Winston. I know a lot of people get frustrated with it, but I think that he will, over time, eventually curve that and he'll continually get better. Because if you look at Jameis Winston statistically from his rookie season to now, he's done nothing but progress. The yards this year, he missed 3 games?
Yeah, he missed quite a few. Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, I feel like if he had been healthy and played all those games, he would have went over 4,000 yards again. I think he ended up with like 3,506 or something like that. But again, it's one of those things where I think he'll progress. I think he's going to be just fine. And I mentioned this, and I don't know if I mentioned this on the show, but I know I've tweeted this out. I predicted Jameis Winston to be the all-time leading passer for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers by the end of next season. If he keeps on the pace that he's on right now, I think he will overtake Vinny Testaverde before the end of the season next year.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And I think Jameis, like you said, I think he's made, as far as each season, I think he's gotten better year, and it shows. I think the numbers as far as his completion percentage, his ability accurate with the football, I think has shown at times. I think he's and then also I know decision making is still inconsistent, but again, I think that's just him, the ultimate playmaker, wants to make that big play. And again, it's just about that balance, between check down play. And I think he's shown he makes the smart reads and takes what's there as far as the defense has given him. I think he'll continue to get better. You look at the numbers and compare him to a Tom Brady, a Peyton Manning. All these guys were in the same realm as far as statistics go, during their first 3 years, options and fumbles. We're out of it and continue to get better decisions with the football, just being in that same boat. And I think, once he gets, let's say he gets a better running game to help him out, I think he'll be very, very deadly, because he can, the actual play action game that he can use consistently, because that's where he's at his best, when he can use that play action and throw over the top. And the sky's the limit. Again, this guy's only 24 years old. Continue to learn and grow tools. It's just about learning how to use those tools, each down and being more consistent, and that will come with time.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. That's pretty much how I feel about it. I kind of brush off the interceptions and stuff like that, only because you win as a team, you lose as a team. And we'll touch on defense. I don't want to step into defense right now, but I can kind of tie everything together next week when we talk about it. But as far as Jameis Winston goes, I think that he's getting. There are times where he does make these crazy plays and he shouldn't do it. But then there are other times where he's a guy. I'm watching the game till the fourth quarter, because he's one of those quarterbacks that can come back. He's going to play till the last whistle. And, he's like the best, one of the best quarterbacks Tampa's even, they've had. So I'm really excited about, what he's capable of doing. And I believe that he's going to improve on a lot of things that he made mistakes on this season. And next season should be an amazing season for him. So I know we've talked about the line and the quarterback now a little bit. One last question about quarterback. Who do you see backing Jameis up next season?
That's a good question. I mean, I'm not sure if Ryan Fitzpatrick is going to be back. He's a free agent. Grooming Ryan Griffin for a long time now. Again, he's coming off the injury IR. So, interesting. Go out and sign another free agent quarterback, or decide to bring Fitzpatrick back and allow him and Ryan Griffin to compete. But yeah, I mean, that's going to be a good battle, this offseason, and see where that goes. Personally, Griffin, I thought he was okay last preseason. I thought he was going to win the job personally, but then he got injured.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well.
But we'll see. I mean, another point is that Jameis, has that, possible suspension, early in the season. So that's another thing to look at. Maybe they do bring back Fitzpatrick. He did win them some games this past season. So maybe they do go for a veteran. So that's something to keep in mind. Jameis doesn't get suspended. I don't think he should, but you know how Roger Goodell is, and
yeah, you kind of have to flip. You kind of have to flip a coin with that idiot, and just to know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no. It just kind of depends on which way the wind's blowing. If he's going to go after somebody or he's not. So we'll just have to stay tuned and wait and see on that. So
yeah, exactly.
we talked about the quarterback. I want to touch on the tight ends now. This, to me, in my opinion, is the strength of this offense. Based on the way everybody played this year, I think I'm really excited. The person I'm most excited about next year is OJ Howard. It's a tie between OJ Howard and Chris Godwin, because Chris Godwin has really stepped up his game, and he's been the consummate professional throughout the season. Wins or losses, the guy's consistently out there getting better and better and better. And that is what's exciting to me. When you got all these different players and they're continually, they're continually progressing. OJ Howard, had he not gotten injured, there's no telling, how many more plays he could have made. And again, coaches have to get these guys involved more and more. That's going to make your defense. That's going to make defensive coordinators respect you and your offense if you're getting those guys involved. If they know you're going to try to hit the wide receiver every time, they're not even going to worry about these guys.
And I would agree with you that, this is the strength of the offense as it stands right now. They have pretty much 4 tight ends that they can run out there, whether it be OJ Howard, Cameron Brate, Anthony Auclair, who came on strong at the end of the year, Cross, who I like as the fullback, / tight end guy. So, but yeah, I mean, they definitely have to find a way. I think Coach Cutter needs to find a way to utilize them in the middle of the field. I think that's something that has been lacking. You got to find ways to attack that middle of the field, whether it be using the tight ends on the seam routes or even curl routes or digs. These guys' size, because there are mismatches when they're on the field, especially in the slot position, and they have to be used more. I mean, OJ Howard needs more targets. Same thing with Cameron Brate. I know there's only one football, but you got to find ways to exploit those matchups and what they do best, and catching the football and making plays downfield. I think that's what they can do. But also OJ Howard and Auclair are great blockers, so you got to utilize them as well.
How long has it been since we've had a physical tight end like that who can catch the ball and run?
Yeah, it's been a while. I think Cameron Brate, he comes close. Again, he doesn't have the physicality that OJ Howard has, but as far as catching the ball, I think he's one of the best, and both of those guys on the field at the same time and utilizing their strengths, and hopefully Cameron Brate can continue to become a better blocker, and he showed a lot of strides there, this season. So hopefully that can continue to grow, guys, and really utilize them to their best. I think it could be dangerous as far as what they're capable of.
I noticed that about Cameron Brate since OJ Howard has been here. His blocking has picked up. I've seen him take out defenders, and I'm really glad to see that physicality, and hopefully that becomes part of his game, moving forward. But like you said, those guys are amazing on the field, and I don't know how many times I've seen them running wide open up the middle. I've seen drag routes where they're running wide open and there's nobody within 5-10 yards of them, and they still go for the deep ball. So again, those are things that need to change, because I would rather have a 3rd and 5 rather than a 3rd and 10, if that happens to be the case. So for me, that's something that you have to really think about. If you missed a play on 1st down and you're 2nd down, you have to consider, this defense may hold me and we may end up, losing the field position battle. We need to go ahead and get this little bit of yardage here so we can try. It'll make it easier, for the next play. But that's just not, what we're seeing.
Yeah, and that goes back to Jameis and also head coach Dirk Cutter. I think they have to be on the same page as far as what is being the primary, what is being called as far as where we need to go with the football situations, as far as what needs to take place, whether we need to take the shot here or we need to go for yardage. Now, again, this goes into the quarterback's hands. It's his decision. He's on the field, so gotta be better as far as being consistent and understanding situational football. And Jameis talked about that, before the season started. That's something they can continue to get better at. And I thought he did a better job of that, these last 4 games, and it really showed.
Yeah.
It's being more consistent.
Yeah. And I have to ask you, kind of going back to the red zone, when you've got a Cameron Brate and you've got a OJ Howard, and you've got a Mike Evans, why is it so hard to get into the end zone in the red zone? What are you seeing, looking at game film? I'll give you kind of my assessment, but I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what happens when they get down to the 20 and in, that, they can't just punch the ball in. What do you see this happening?
What I see a lot of is really, it's really just overthinking and play design, to be honest. The play design is not very good. They still try to run their same offense that they run in the 20 to the 20. Once you get in the red zone, you have to be simple oriented, as far as it comes down to creating space, because there's not a lot of space in the red zone. Everything tightens up. Find ways to create space, and either you do that by running the football, down the opposing team's throat. And the Bucs did that against the Saints on the opening drive. They ran it 3 straight times. They got into the end zone. You like to see more of that, just run it downhill, smash mouth ball. And if you can't run the football consistently, then you have to find ways to create space, whether it be, pick routes, whether it be slants, whether it be drag routes, fade. You have to execute it properly. It's about finding certain matchups and exploiting the space that is given. To be quick with the football. And again, that plays into the part of offensive line. It plays into the part of not having a consistent running back or consistent running game down there in the goal line. That all plays a part, but from what I saw, it was mainly play design and play call execution.
You know what? That's exactly kind of where I was going with this. Somebody else mentioned it. Predictable play calling. It's like the defense had the Bucs playbook, and every time you get into the red zone, you get within 2 yards. It's either a pre-snap penalty, or it's they just blow up the defense blows up the play. And I just didn't see enough, as you mentioned, creativity. And again, we'll get to the head coach here in a minute. I mean, I'm kind of working my way back to him, so I'm not gonna talk too much about it right now, but. Just kind of watching the Bucs play, there were missed opportunities. I mean, when you've got guys like Cameron Brate, you've got guys like OJ Howard. I mean, why not get him more involved? I think he ended up with 6 touchdowns this year. And again, he's a guy. I realize he's a rookie, but he's a guy that you need to get him involved as much as possible. And they just didn't take advantage. Mike Evans, and I'll get to the wide receivers in a minute, but all these different players that they have, they just for some reason couldn't get it in. And Doug Martin, again, kind of going back to the running backs, I was you can't say that I was just a bandwagon fan. I stuck with Doug Martin through this year. I expected big things from Doug Martin, but unfortunately, he's not the same Doug Martin from 2015. So it looks like the Bucs. It's time for the Bucs to move on and try to fix that running game and get a more dynamic running game than what they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll give a couple of examples. You look at Panthers game. I'm sorry, Detroit Lions game that was here at Ray J. I put a play up in one of my articles. The Leonard Wester touchdown. That is a perfect play design as far as creating space. It's something that needs to occur more often. You pretty much have to your left. They run across the field to the right. You drag those defenders over, creating space, and then you pull out a tight end to the left hand side. It's something that just hasn't occurred enough. There hasn't been enough as far as getting the quarterback moving, as far as on a rollout to have run pass options. Dynamic runner. I don't care what anybody says. He knows how to move with the football and make plays with his feet. To not have him on a rollout more consistently is mind-boggling. It's just something that needs to take place more. Give him the option to run the football or throw it take place, I think, more consistently this season. And that goes for, from the 20 to the 20. It doesn't have to be inside the red zone either. It needs to be called more often, personally.
Yeah, there you go. So, we're on the same page with that right there. I just, again, I just didn't feel like, enough was done with the weapons that the Bucs had. I'm sure they could have at least come away with a few more touchdowns than what they did. When they did get creative, and there were times where they did, it looked like it did work for them. So, Dirk Cutter, he's got to, step it up, and we'll definitely be talking about him shortly. But I want to jump over to the wide receivers because it's somebody we really haven't. We kind of touched on them a little bit, but in your opinion, do you feel like the wide receivers underachieved this year?
Well, I mean, I think from, expectations going into the season, I would say yes. I think, obviously Mike Evans didn't have the season that he wanted for 1,000 yards, 1,000-yard seasons. So, again, he's still a heck of a player, and I expect him to continue to improve. I think he was healthy all year. I think he was dealing with injuries.
Yeah, I think it was a hip injury
for Deshaun Jackson. Chris Godwin was battling injuries all year. Adam Humphries was Mr. Consistent again. I thought he had a great year. For guys, I think is a strong group, and I think to return next year, and I think they're going to get better. I think more timing with Jameis is going to help Deshaun Jackson. I think Mike Evans just learning the game more, getting better with his route running, learning how to create space and not have to use his hands, to get those pass interference calls. He's going to get better at that. Chris Godwin, again, I think if he's 100% can be a beast. And I think if they can find a way to get him on the field more often and find him more opportunities, I think he'll take advantage. I mean, the wide receiver group is something to be excited about. I think it's going to continue to get better. The fifth spot, I think, I think he's got potential. I think if he gets his head on straight as far as doing what he needs to do to get better, I think he's got, upside to be something as far as a kick returner or punt returner of that nature. So Martino, I like on special teams. So it's a strong group, I would say. But yeah, I mean, disappointing. You would expect bigger numbers for Deshaun and those guys, but disappointed as a whole. So can't really put too much on it.
Yeah, and again, what people have to keep in mind, Dirk Cutter and Mike Smith are the coach and the offensive coordinator and defensive coordinator next season. So you kind of just have to wait and see what they do. I know a lot of people weren't happy with the move to keep him here. A lot of people are frustrated with the play calling, and again, this is a time where they have to go back and look at what they didn't do and try to get those things corrected, because, you know, you can say what you want, you know, you win as a team, you lose as a team, and you know, you lead by example, and it all starts at the top. So those guys got to get it together. This is that season. You have a winning season, your first season there, then you have a losing season, your second season. So this season here is going to tell you who the real Dirk Cutter is, whether it's good or bad. So just kind of remains to be seen what's going to happen. And please, you know, folks, I don't want to hear how tough the schedule was, because I heard the schedule was supposed to be real tough in 2016, and the Bucks were only supposed to win like 4 games, and you still got to go out and play these games. So I'm not so much worried about the opponents as much as I'm worried about the team going out and executing and having the best players on the field in order to win. Because again, it comes down to wins and losses. You know, you've got a great core of tight ends. You've got some really good wide receivers, and you just need to get that cohesiveness. And you know, I think that, you know, that is possible for next season. Jameis Winston getting, you know, in sync with Deshaun Jackson is kind of scary, considering how fast this guy is. So, I mean, just little things like that. And, you know, Tampa's in business once they can get that done. Any last thoughts on, you know, anybody that we've discussed so far?
I think, you know, I think offensively, you know, you have to be excited about our quarterback and the receivers and the tight ends, obviously. And this offseason, it's really going to come down to if we can add a dynamic running game and get that offensive line to be more consistent, you know, going forward. Now, again, I'm excited about the offensive line as well, as far as the guys that are returning. Excited about Donovan Smith. I know there's been a lot of criticism about him, but I think he's going to continue to get better. Shown, you know, especially in the second halves of seasons, he's really figured, you know, things out and really has played well down the stretch of the season. I think if he can just find a way to keep that going every game, I think he's going to be something special. You know, Ali Marpet and DeMar Dotson did well before they got injured. So those things are things to be excited about for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. You can kind of, what you have to do right now is kind of fill in the gaps and possibly get some depth at the offensive line position to, you know, try to get this working a little bit better. But I wanted to kind of move up a little bit more, and I want to talk about Dirk Cutter. You know, again, we kind of touched on him a little bit, but you know, as a whole, how much of this season do you lay on Dirk Cutter as opposed to the players, or is it just I know there's enough blame to go around, but Dirk Cutter being the head coach, the guy that calls the plays, the guy responsible for the details, and we saw a lot of pre-snap penalties, you know, things that are normally cleaned up in preseason and camp. We were seeing those during the regular season, even late into the regular season. What are your thoughts on, you know, where is Dirk Cutter at? Is he somebody you could see leading this team to a playoff game?
Well, I'll be honest. I mean, the coaching this past season was pretty much shit, to be honest. It just wasn't good enough. And there's too many times I saw in film where we were getting out coached. There was other teams that pretty much knew what was going to happen as far as what was being called. They pretty much saw what was coming, whether it be defensively or offensively. It just wasn't good enough. And I think Coach Cutter needs to really reevaluate what he's doing as far as a head coach and really try to understand where he needs to improve. He has to be more accountable. He's got to hold these players accountable. He's got to do a better job of holding his coaching staff accountable and making sure guys are doing the right things day out. And for whatever reason, that just didn't take place. You know, you have guys in there didn't need to be playing. They shouldn't be playing. The play on film wasn't good enough. They should have been replaced. Now, again, I get it. If you don't have a guy to take his place, I understand that. But it's about sending a message. And I never thought that message was sent this season, especially guys like J.R. Sweezy he was struggling week in and week out, and he continues to get played. Same thing with like T.J. Ward. his incident came out, early this year, and that happened in October. I mean, where was the message sent? I know he played, I think, the same week. So it's just things like that, just holding guys accountable. As far as Dirk Cutter goes, as far as his responsibilities, as far as a play caller, as far as the head coach of this offense, pathetic. I mean, the game plans week in and week out were just not there. Verse in the play calling, no diversity, no variation, just too many inconsistencies week in and week out. And that's why I thought he was going to get fired, but it didn't happen. And I understand the continuity. Again, a lot of strange stuff happened this year, so I understand why maybe that played a part into bad coaching, but that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, and for me, I felt like he was inconsistent in the way he handled things. When you've got a running back running like
Right.
Peyton Barber was running, and then you bring Doug Martin in, or you bring in
Right.
Charles Sims, and you it's like you regress basically on offense. Instead of leaving your hot guy in there, letting him get more yards, he's moving where he needs to. And he's just not, those are, I don't, and he wasn't injured. And there have been a couple of times that he's done this where Barber wasn't injured, but they wanted to try to get Doug Martin in. I don't know, as a change of pace back or how that would work, but I just didn't see the same thing out of Doug Martin that I saw out of Peyton Barber. And again, this is a guy that, he's fought very hard to get where he is. And, why not give him the ball? That's like Keith Tandy on defense. And I don't want to get into defense, but he's just an example. He's another guy I felt didn't get enough snaps. And, he finally did. And, he kind of worked his way up and he got injured or whatever. But again, with Peyton Barber, we saw what he was capable of doing production wise. Why not keep going with him? And it just, the things like that didn't make sense. There was several times misuse of timeouts where you could have put your team in a better position to win a game, but timeouts weren't utilized. It's like you had to save them for the next game or something. I don't know. I don't know what he was thinking about, but again, there's just little things like that. And you talked about predictability. I think we both did. There were times where the defense, they automatically knew what was getting ready to happen just by looking at how the team was lined up. And there was an announcer, and I believe that was the Green Bay game. There was an announcer that said it looked like the defense lined up because they knew what the Bucs were getting ready to do. That's just how predictable they were. And, and again, I'm not bashing him. I'm just pointing these things out. He's the head coach next year. Whether you like him or not, you're kind of stuck with him. So, again, I'm going to take a step back. I'm just pointing this stuff out into season. This is where I've had a chance to go and look at a few games and go back and look at key moments and stuff like that. And I just come to the conclusion that he's just not consistent. It kind of what it reminded me of? Andy Reid at Kansas City this year. Second half of the Kansas City Titans game, Kareem Hunt nowhere to be found. They totally went away from what they were doing to go and win the game to playing not to lose the game kind of scenario. And to me, I've seen that on multiple occasions with the Bucs where they run an offense and they run their defense as they're playing not to lose instead of playing to win. Put your foot on their throat and just keep it going, but you just aren't seeing that. And maybe are you seeing the same thing? I just don't see that killer instinct in them.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of weird things. I mean, just, like you said with Peyton Barber, taking him out when he's, doing well. Again, it's inconsistencies across the board. Game plan, they come out with a strong game plan. Things are working, and then in the second half, they completely change up, and it just you come out in two tight end sets, one play, and then you're in a 5 wide, and trying to do certain things, and there was no money place created. We can go to this play and it's going to work every time. I just didn't see that, not enough as far as it just wasn't there. Red zone, again, has been a problem since Dirk Cutter has arrived. Thing that he has to figure out if he wants to stay here. This game is about points. If you can't score points a game, you're not going to be very good. You're not going to have a good record. Let's just be honest. Unless you have a dominant defense, but it's hard to do that. I mean, you have to have a scoring offense in this league to be one of the top, playoff teams, playoffs, especially in our division. I mean, our 3 division opponents, they know how to score the football points. I mean, that's what it's about. So that's something I think is the biggest issue going forward. Dirk Cutter has to figure out his red zone offense, but not only that, he's got to figure out an identity and stick with it and really build that up and be more consistent with his play calling, because it's just not there right now.
Yeah, and again, and I know a lot of people will agree with me on this. I've always felt like Dirk Cutter needs to give up the play calling so he can focus on the details of the overall team. There are only a few coaches out there, only a few coaches that I can think of that can play call and coach the team, and he's not one of them. So to be very honest, I mean, he needs to really rethink that and kind of lean more on his assistants to do what they do. I know a lot of people, a lot of comments in here are talking about get rid of the assistants. But I mean, what is your offensive coordinator good for if you're not utilizing him to call the plays? That's what he's there for. Let's use him for that so you can focus on the team as a whole. That's what your job is. You're the head coach. Yeah. You need to spend as much time with special teams, offense, defense, so on and so forth. Even the training staff. There's just so many different things that are going on. You can't spend all of your time on offense and play calling because, I mean, that's where the rest of the team gets they're kind of lacking at that time. So I don't know. It's just something that he needs to stop being so stubborn. Who he reminds me of is Greg Schiano. Greg Schiano was the same way. That fool would run the same. He would have his playbook the same from the first half to second half. He wouldn't make any adjustments, and he didn't care what anybody said. He's going to run that. He's going to run it the way he wants to run it. And that's kind of what Dirk Cutter's reminding me of is just kind of how Schiano was, my way or no way.
Yeah, I mean, and the game management has been very poor, and that's something that I think has to improve. He's got to get better with his game management overall. Decisions as far as when to take timeouts, when to go for it on fourth down, certain game time decisions that he has to be better at both sides of the ball. Absolutely, whether we're going to blitz here or again, I don't know if he makes those calls. I know Mike Smith's the D coordinator, but just certain things that have to be better as far as the game management goes. It's been very poor. I mean, you look at 2016. I mean, he pretty much cost us a couple of games. I remember game management. Probably this year as well. And they kick a field goal, when you need to, or just putting up points or enough when you have a chance to, go down the field and get some, certain things like that. It's just has to be better. And it goes within play calling as well. Play design and game planning, knowing how to attack opponents' weakness is something that needs to be season. I think he's just got to be better at it.
Yeah, I had
your own weakness.
And I had somebody tell me that it had a lot to do with players' execution on the field. But again, if you're running the same play and it didn't work the first time, second time, or the third time you ran it, and you're still running it, well, there's a problem. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I talked with some, Bucs fans as well, as far as, if it's a bad play call, it's hard to execute it well. I mean, a bad play call is a bad play call. It's going to be poorly executed if it's not a right play call. I mean, it's just that obvious. It's a play caller to put these guys in positions to succeed. And if they're not being put in those spots, have good execution. If you have Odell Beckham Jr. and Mike Evans on both, one side of the field, told to run the right route to help them get open. I understand if they don't run the route correctly, yeah, that could hurt. But, if guys are not being designed to get open, it's hard to execute that part for the quarterback. If the quarterback has to do a 5 to 7 step drop, it's not good enough to protect for that long. I mean, you're going to run into either a sack or a rush throw. I mean, it's
Jameis Winston getting hurt versus the Cardinals. I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, if you don't have the personnel to run plays the way that they're supposed to be run, you have to be able to make adjustments and change all that up and say, hey, we can't do this. Let's go this way. And we got the strength. We have the strength here. We can run this play. But no, you stick with the same game plan, regardless who's on the field. You just can't do that.
Yeah. And on that note, on Jameis' injury, I believe he was injured game. I think he was already hurt game. I think the Cardinals made it worse. My personal opinion, I remember him getting hit quite a bit in the Minnesota game, and I think that's where the shoulder went down. Because if you look at that Giants game, the next week, the ball just wasn't coming out as sharp as I thought, as far as previous weeks. But that's just my opinion. I don't know if that's fact. That's what I saw on tape. Fans have said that as well. So, but yeah, again, it goes to your point. I mean, why are you calling these plays if you know you have a bum shoulder quarterback out there who, is not getting the same velocity to throw it downfield? It's just not very smart. And again, it goes back to what you said about being stubborn. And I think that is the case. I think, he's trying to, and you got to have an offensive line. If you don't have the offensive line to pass protect, successful, because it's a vertical offense, and that's what it's predicated on.
Yeah. But again, you have to be able to check down as well, and we just didn't see enough of that. Now, one last question I do want to hit you with: do you feel like Jameis is limited on audibling out of plays, and can he change plays at the line? I don't think, I'm trying to think how many times. I haven't really seen him do a whole lot of that, but I think Jameis has a good football IQ. I think that, maybe he can identify things that he sees. And do you think that Dirk Cutter wants to keep all the play calling to himself, or is it something where Jameis is kind of working towards where he will be able to change up plays at the line?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really haven't got an answer on that as far as how much he's allowed to do. I'll have to ask around and see what I can find out.
Because I've heard both. I've heard both sides. I've heard yes and I've heard no.
Yeah, so I kind of gotten the same as far as those answers too. And at times I've seen him where he's made checks and stuff, but again, it's been very inconsistent. The last 4 games, I thought he was taking more control of the offense. It seemed like he was, pretty much doing what he wanted to out on the field. And I think that's where you saw the report of him and disagreement as far as the Ian Rappaport, coming out and say they had a argument or whatnot. And that could be the case. I think Jameis was upset with the offense, and I think he understood that, it needed to be better and he needed to take more control. It shows on that Saints game where he went to Chris Godwin for the touchdown. The play was designed to go to the left and he ignored it and made a great play for the win. So for that, to be honest.
I would really, he's a quarterback that I could see doing a whole lot more if he could control things at the line. If he saw something that didn't match up with what the play that was being sent out to him, where he could kind of change it up a little bit, I don't see where that would be a problem. At the end of the day, it's about wins and losses. And, this year, Dirk Cutters is auditioning for his job. Jason Light auditioning for his job. So these guys got to pull out all the stops. And again, like I said at the beginning of the show, Dirk Cutter, Jason Light, and everybody else below, they have to be on point this year. This has to be from the offseason, free agency, to the draft, to camp, to mini camp, to preseason, it all has to go. It all has to go down good in order for these guys to keep their job.
Definitely. I mean, it's it's win now. I mean, this team has to make it back to the playoffs. It's just been too long, and it's time this team starts winning again. And again, that's why I start with accountability. Everyone has to be held accountable, and it starts from the top. So there's no way to put it other than that.
Yeah. So next week we're gonna talk about the defense, and I welcome any questions that you guys have, and I'll make sure to get all those questions answered if I can. As far as offense, I mean, again, they're just I didn't like the play calling, and it was just weird. It just it didn't play to the strengths of these players, and there were a lot of guys that were open, as I mentioned before. Case in point, when Jameis hit OJ Howard on that drag route, and OJ ran it for a touchdown, those are the kind of things that they should be doing. Right, exposing the middle of the field. But again, it's one of those things. I don't know how much, and somebody had mentioned here in the chat that it's Dirk Cutter making these calls, but I would really be interested in hearing from somebody within the organization if that's the case, because again, that's one of the things that was really mentioned about Jameis coming out of college was his football IQ and how he could read defenses. And so I look at a lot of the mistakes he makes, and they're pretty much on him. They're not like the defense is doing anything major.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. All right. Well, this week, we kind of touched on the offense a little bit, and next week, let's see. Let's see. All right. Next week, we're going to hit on the defense, and we're going to definitely be talking about that on thing. I can have. Yeah, Amazement 717 talking about. Do you have if you do have a podcast, I'd be interested in checking that out. But yeah, we're going to talk about the defense next week. Defense, is going to be kind of interesting. I'm going to have to kind of do some research on them. And again, it's one of those things where, we'll touch on that next week and kind of go from there. But Mike, thank you so much for coming on tonight. Any final thoughts? What are you working on this week?
Yeah, I mean, I just put out an article on, our offense as far as what to look for in free agency. Just a little preview. Again, it's I'll have more as far as free agency gets closer, who's going to be available as far as the free agents, but just some guys that I think would be good fits for this Bucs offense if they are available, touching on the running back and guard position. So that's up at realbuckstalk.com. But yeah, I mean, overall offense, I mean, it was disappointing. This team has to find ways to put up more points. I mean, that's what it's about. You have to be more consistent in the red zone, and that's really what it's going to come down to next season. Can they fix that red zone? And I think they will if they improve the running game. That's huge. I mean, if you can run the ball inside the 20, of scoring is much greater. So it's got to be better, because I think that's where the talent of this team is loaded right now, and it's got to take them to where they need to go. So great show as always, and let's go Bucs. Again, it's going to be a big off season.
Yeah, and guys, I really apologize about the last part of the season. I was gone to Europe for about a month, and then I got back, and then I just got back from a funeral on Monday. So I will be back, and I will be consistent. Going into the off season, we'll definitely be talking a lot more about free agency, which is the next thing coming up. I guess you'll definitely get a clearer picture after the Super Bowl when you get an idea of who's possibly going to be available and what's going on. So again, that's something that you can also look forward to. And I'll have this guy on as usual, and we'll definitely be talking Bucs football. And I'm going to go back through the chat real quick before we get off here. Amazement 717, he had mentioned that he thought that Dirk Cutter needs to trust Winston more and let him do his thing when he's hot and he's feeling. Yeah, I agree with you right there. That's on the same page. And then he said Dirk was, as he mentioned, his stubbornness as well. Amazement 717, having a stronger assistant can help. McVay hired strong assistant with Rams, knowing that he needed it since he's a rookie head coach. Unfortunately, Amazement, as you mentioned earlier, Dirk Cutter is kind of stubborn, and I just don't see that happening with him going with a different assistant. But it would be good for him, but I just don't see it happening. What are your thoughts on that, Mike?
Yeah, as you're talking about the play calling.
Yeah, play calling.
Yeah, I don't see Coach Cutter giving that up. Again, it's just something that he's going to have to be better at. I think. Again, it goes back to being accountable. Same thing with his staff. I think his staff has to be better as a whole. Him, holding these guys, making sure they're doing the right things and putting their players in position to succeed is something that needs to take place. But yeah, I don't see him giving it up.
Yeah, and Shooter and Stash had mentioned the Bucs will never win with our self-proclaimed leader on defense. This is the best one. Hand over the reins to Quan. You know what? I don't have a problem with that. And let's see here. The offense will get better. I hate Dirk calling plays. He has too much to do as a head coach. Yeah, that's pretty much what we've been saying that. Disagree to. Okay, they're talking about defense. We'll get on that next week. But let's see. No homework needed. The Bucs finished towards the bottom on defense every year. Last year was an exception. No accountability, no leadership, just excuses. And that's defense. That's he's got a valid point there. So we'll see what happens. So one quick question, and this is somebody I know that you mentioned both of these guys. B. Loggins had asked, love to know what Michael has to say about Isaiah Crowell and Jerick McKinnon. And and this was in your article, wasn't it?
Right.
Yeah. Mike on realbuckstalk.com has an article about just this is initial who he's seeing for free agency and who would be a good fit for the Bucs. Please go check this article out. I mean, I think you would really benefit from checking it out. Might get the other mic on next week. Bucs fans have a lot to say. Might get the other mic on the show next week. Us Bucs have a lot to say. Oh, you talking about Mark or Mike? Amazement was asking about the other mic. I'm not sure. Let's see. I'm not sure. Yeah, then Shooter and Stash said then they need another coach managing the clock and another task while picking plays. Yeah, it's too much. There, again, I'm like I don't have very high expectations. I don't really have any expectations. Whatever happens, happens. We'll just see if they do this. Again, the Bucs are they decided to keep Dirk Cutter. Maybe they know something we don't. I don't know, but that remains to be seen. And guys, thank you so much for checking out the podcast. I appreciate it. I know I was getting ready to cut it loose, but I appreciate you guys in live chat every week, giving your opinions. So I don't want you guys to stop doing that. I want to make sure that I get this stuff out there. Get the other mic. The Mike Smith is who he's talking about. He's talking about getting Mike Smith on here. So yeah, I wish we could. Yeah, that would be kind of interesting to see what he had to say. But anyway, that's pretty much it for us. I think that was the comment of the show right there. So I appreciate that. Good. But anyway, that's pretty much it for us. Thanks for checking us out, and look for next week. We're going to be talking defense. I know, we already know what we've got, but it's kind of cool to kind of break down the different positions and, just see what's going on. And you know what? I'll put it out there and see if we can get Mike Smith on here. I'm not making any promises, but I'll ask. But anyway, that's pretty much it for me. Michael Pless, thanks a lot. Everybody have a good